Hello, everybody. Welcome to our weekly Subspace Developer Sync. Start off with an overview for the week. Actually, start off with a reminder. Next week, we will not be having a dev sync, as almost everyone will be syncing in person at the all-company offsite. So I think everybody's excited for that. All right, for the overview from last week, progress with Gemini 3C. The network is up and running and producing blocks. I know that we're still having some issues. I know there's issues with plotting. I think that's primarily due to lack of farmers. I believe there's progress being made on that. Nazar will probably be able to fill us in. Also appears there might be some issues with domains, as I'm not seeing transaction bundles. So Lu Chang can fill us in on that. We do hope to begin opening up this network to ambassadors this week. If we can get things kind of all smooth and working, then we'll begin opening up the network. I believe that's all I've got for the overview. Last week, my main focus was on preparing a presentation for the offsite, which is going to be pretty fun. I think Nazar and I are working on, and then getting an engineering handbook plan in place. So I did get that. So my primary goal this week is going to actually start the work on that. We do have kind of a compressed timeline, trying to get this complete by the end of, I'd like to get it mostly complete by the end of February, so that we have a month before the end of quarter to kind of get it cleaned up and presentable for the community. This week you will start being tagged for various sections. I'll be giving some good instructions and such, and I've talked to a few of you already about that. But as you see this also kind of coming together, anybody who's not been tagged, feel free to jump in with comments and thoughts as well, as it will be in our, it'll be being done in our public Notion page. All right. And then I did want to start off again with another great joke. I say this is not from ChatGPT. I have found, and maybe I'll open up a discussion in our AI channel about this, but it seems to have a very one-dimensional sense of humor. So it says very obvious jokes that don't have any kind of double meaning. So I'm not sure that we've really reached kind of the next level of AI yet until it can come up with some good original jokes. But I did just use, traditional methods of getting a joke, which was Google. So Google's still good for something. All right, this one's probably especially for Daria. But anybody that can answer this, jump in. Why do cryptographers never have more than 2 kids? Anyone?
Well, I only have an option that you call them Alice and Bob.
You got it. See, I knew Daria. After Alice and Bob, they can't think of any other names. So.
Well, I actually know more if you're interested. Okay. There is a whole list and the roles that they have. There is, like, for instance, there is Eve, but Eve is eavesdropper. Then there is Mallory, but Mallory is malicious, and so on and so forth.
This is going in the handbook.
Okay.
I agree with Daria. Like, this is not a good joke.
It was better than ChatGPT's attempts at that joke. So. All right. Well, let's get started with everybody else's updates. Nazar, how are things coming along?
Yeah, last week was quite productive. The refactoring I was doing on the farmer side was finally done and merged, and Ivan was able to take advantage of that. Looks pretty good, okay, so far, and it seems to work. And there are also some optimizations included, so that's good. Me and Shamil were doing some DSN debugging. We were basically trying to ensure that we are in a good shape to have another snapshot that we did last week. And there are still some things to debug for this week. As mentioned, we have some plotting challenges. We need to figure out why that happens exactly, and we need to ensure that we can work even in those conditions reliably. And I was also working on a small demo project for the offsite. I will not talk about what it is, but you'll see that during presentation. For this week, I think the biggest goal is to have implementation plan with specific steps for the version 2.3 consensus. There are different things we need to have in place before we can actually implement the consensus itself. So I will try to outline all of those steps so we can work on them in parallel, concurrently, however you want to call it, and it's not necessarily blocked on me having all of them in my head. But besides that, I need to still prepare some slides for the offsite, and yeah, DSN debugging is still an ongoing thing, alongside with some usual responsibilities. And I think I can share Shamil's update as well, because he's not here. So he did have finally finished the initial implementation of the block importing from DSN during regular startup as an opt-in feature. That is finally resolving Farmer's Dilemma. It's not perfect, but it does work. And this week he'll be working on more to improve that, to verify what the pieces we are downloading. And there are still many, many things to do. And there were also some refactorings to make all of that possible before that. So I think this week, still debugging DSN and working on that line of effort of ensuring we can reliably sync nodes from DSN without requiring archival nodes. That's the end goal for us.
Great. Rahul, you had a lot going on this week.
Yeah, so I've been working on the proposal document for the block optimization, where we dedupe, and since we already gossip the transactions individually, so that when we gossip the blocks, we don't have to retransmit the transactions. That would save a lot of bandwidth going forward. So there are two parts to it. First one, I kind of went through all the research material, research papers for the different schemes that we are looking at. Primarily, we have this compact blocks, then we have like things like extreme thin blocks, and then graphene. And there's some new entrants proposed in the last 1 or 2 years, which are kind of not very mature. We probably won't go with that. So at least now we know like how they relatively perform in terms of bandwidth and overall latency. How many steps you need in the handshake before you can get a block. So I'm going to write it down in the Notion doc. And the second part is probably the more complex part, because the substrate is written in such a way that the blocks are assumed to be full blocks. And it's like tightly coupled with the existing networking code base, where they have request response model to pull the blocks from the other nodes that announce a block. So I'm working on figuring out how to modularize a substrate so that we can have like pluggable block relay mechanism, just like other parts of the stack. So that would be the first step we would need to experiment with any of these new schemes that we are proposing. So that's where my focus has been in the last 3-4 days. I will put that also in the proposal doc, which is ETA is like next 2-3 days, I think. So that is that. And also I work with Daria on the consensus v2.3 front to understand what changes are required in terms of working with the CKZG and the Chia libraries. I plan to start working on that once I'm done with the block relay stuff. So that's it for me.
Great. Liu Chang, welcome back.
Hi. So I was offline for a few days, like last week. So there are only several small things done last week. So the first thing is to update the primary chain and the system delivery time on Gemini 3C. And I also have finished a few executor improvements and fixes based on the new findings, like on Gemini 3 and locally. I also partially adjust the comments from Nazar on the then execution rough spec. For this week, the first thing is to look into the potential executor issues on Gemini 3C. And apart from that, the first thing I would like to work on is to make the bundle election storage proof more efficient. So currently the entire executor set is contained in the storage proof, which can be made more lightweight by using an accumulated root of the exactors, like, by tracking accumulated root of the exactors in the state. There are also a few other things, a few other like issues I'm watching, so I might also look into them after finishing this one. Yeah, that's pretty much it.
Great. Ning, welcome back as well.
Hi everyone. And for last week, also had our office for 3 days, and I spending most of the rest of the time on learning the how to calculate the exchange rates in the substrate, how they doing that, and to doing that, I think we need to like writing some benchmark for each exchange in the palace, and in this benchmark, they will like trigger a code pass to the exchange to see how they like how many data pair read and write operation they will trigger and how many calculation they will trigger. And so that if we want to explore parity rates, we need to write a benchmark like a text for each this parity exchange. And it's quite trivial for each of this benchmark, but it will be quite large because we had so many exchanges. And so that I plan to doing this work part by part, like piece by piece, and not like dedicate the whole week to this text. And so that for the next week, I will more focus on some executor issues that Lucian had posted on GitHub, like prevent the duplicate bundles and some validate the submit bundle exchange when we are occurs. And also we see some math operation in the domains, and we're working on the exchange rate calculation if I have time. Yeah.
Great. Ved.
Hey everyone. Last week, the first portion of the week was mostly went into discussing the new verification for messaging and also getting some feedback on that. Was that jumped into bringing up the DevNet up, and also some changes for the Gemini 3C. We had to also start some farmers there. Actually, just one, not many. And then yeah, post that since I haven't got any critical feedback on the verification that Jeremiah and I started, I went ahead with that changes as well. This first PR out there, that's just cleaning up the domain tracker so that's completely removed, and then the verification could be done in the next consecutive PRs. That's pretty much my primary focus this week as well, and maybe some infra support for Lucian or anyone else.
Sounds good. Parth.
Yeah, so last week I was researching into the implementation for Ethereum Light Client. We did found one, which is NoForks Ethereum 2.0 Light Client palette. Thank you, Web, for the suggestion. Actually, yeah, I emailed. I could not find Discord, so I emailed the CEO over the weekend, and he replied that the reasoning behind why the palette is not according to spec. So over the weekend I rewrote it to be according to the spec, as because it was a reason on their end. We can actually rewrote it, but anyways, that plus I'm also writing a sample gateway palette which can verify the contract storage proof, Merkle proof. And this week also my focus would be to integrate both of this palette into a new domain, where I might need your help on that as well. So I will reach out sometimes later this week. So yeah.
Great. All right, let's move to products. Stefano, is this your first time in this meeting?
Yes. Hey,
Oh,
everyone.
we should introduce you. This is Stefano, new head of product. So welcome, Stefano.
Yeah. Thank you. Hey, everyone. Excited to be around.
Okay. Do you have any updates from last week?
Yeah. I think what is important to say is that we are reviewing the processes on how we are building products at Subspace. So the most important update is that now we have a formalized handbook on how we are building the PRDs, the product requirement documents. And the first PRD that is in the pipeline now is for the Explorer, our internal Explorer. And more specifically, we are now working on the product brief, which is a small one-page document that will help identify and prioritize what is next in the pipeline for the product engineering team. Not much more. We are also preparing for our offsite, so I think we will see the first result in maybe like 2 or 3 meetings from now.
Great. Serge, how are things coming?
Yeah, so on the infrastructure, I have updated Archive and Squid to process blocks from Gemini 3C. Previously, it was working against Gemini 3B. Apart from that, I was working on the dark mode for UI. It's almost done, but it's blocked by some mockups missing. I hope this will be resolved once we have like a roadmap that Stefano mentioned. Yeah, we had a bunch of sync-ups on the current UX challenges on the Block Explorer. And while I was working on the dark mode, I also created a bunch of minor UI bugs. And Natasha has already fixed all of them. There was one issue on the backend, and she also wanted to address that one. So I gave her like a small introduction on the backend code base. And yeah, my next priorities will depend on the mockups, and hopefully I will be able to finish dark mode and start addressing other UX challenges that we discussed. That's all.
All right. Well, next Natasha's out, so Ivan, which is great to see you and Ozgen are there together. So Ivan, then Ozgen. We'll just let it go.
Yeah, sure. Like for the last couple of days, we were working together. So yeah, as for me, like during last week, we finalized like Gemini 3C preparation. Like we finally merged that big PR with all the changes coming from the monorepo. So I also reused networking for SDK again. So at first I merged like at least some working configuration of networking. Right now it's like both networking instance is reused for both Node and Farmer. Apart from that, I also added DevNet chain spec to SDK. Also, I updated to monorepo so that it reflects the latest changes on the SDK side. So yeah, also we've tested SDK and CLI a bit for Gemini 3C. So we discovered one issue related to that. I mean, related to the memory provider storage, which is fixed right now. Like we added the party provider, DB provider for the node, so we won't see any errors on that. Yeah, right now we're doing like some testing for Gemini 3C and DevNet. Yeah, as for this week, I hope we can get CLI and SDK up and running for Gemini 3C. Right now, plotting is not working, while still syncing is fine. We just tested it. Yeah, and also I guess we'll study some. At least I will study some KZG stuff in crypto, as we agreed with Ozgan. Also, like spend some time learning Rust.
Stuff, yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, that's it on my end.
Okay, for my end, as Ivan updated all the settings to SDK, I also updated them to CLI. For example, the DevNet and DevChain are now supported by CLI. As Ivan mentioned, we tested everything. Like we tested Gemini 3C and DevNet like in a couple of iterations with different versions. For the plotting issue, we mentioned it's like it's trying to fetch some pieces from DSN, but usually two or three, and constantly tries to fetch them, but it fails, and it seems like it's stuck. Other than that, as Ivan mentioned, we had a simple bug for syncing. We fixed it just before this meeting. Syncing finished without any errors, so I think we are good. In the logs, there were no warnings or errors for the syncing. For this week's primary goal, as I said, we just fixed it, so PR is not published or merged yet. I will just submit a PR for that provider storage fix. And if like plotting is, if we increase the quality of plotting, we can immediately try it on the CLI side so that we can publish another release for the CLI. I think for now, publishing a release for CLI does not is not that meaningful. Maybe if you think otherwise, we can discuss. Aside from that, yeah, that's all.
So is the plotting still not working? Is that what? And maybe Nazar has some input into this, but is this the fact that like the cache size, the piece cache size was small, or?
That was on the node side. That was basically like a workaround to
Okay.
ensure that if farmers don't store it, at least some nodes store it. But it shouldn't strictly be necessary. And also, we need to implement recovery of missing pieces from the other pieces of the segment, which is not implemented right now. So there are still many things we can do about this. Just need time.
Okay. Great. Well, let's move to research. Daria, it's been very busy.
Yeah, I've been busy laying out everything that we've done around the new consensus. Mostly busy with preparing the slide deck for the talk on the consensus that I'm going to be giving later this week. At the time where we usually had the all hands, it's going to be the consensus dedicated evening. For me, evening. For some of you, morning. I have been addressing also comments. We have done a dry run with a smaller audience of Nazar, Chen, Jeremiah, and Rahul. I have brought Rahul up to date with all of the consensus intricacies. I am right now finishing the third and hopefully the final draft of the presentation, and I am actually writing everything I want to say down. So it's easier to reuse and that I could go through it faster because we're pretty limited in time. We could probably spend like 3-4 hours talking about it easily. So I am writing that down, and I have been addressing comments on the spec and yeah, brought some implementation C challenges to Rahul as well on the side of the Chia library and the CKZG library. That yeah. Well, this week, my primary goal is to deliver the presentation.
Great. I'm looking forward to it, as I believe a lot of people are. So I'm sure you're doing a great job.
Quick one, Daria.
Yes.
It's great that you're writing all that down. It would be nice if you could somehow transform that into a blog post to capture all that and publicize it. Because we would like to eventually publish an article about consensus v2, and that might be the easiest way to do it.
Yeah, we could. So I'm like writing down like slide by slide to edit the notes. If we could, you know, in between that, add the diagrams that I have on slides, I think that would be pretty comprehensive.
Awesome.
All right. I believe that's everybody. And Jeremiah, did you have anything you wanted to add?
No, not today. Thanks, Jenny.
All right. Good. All right. Well, thank you. We will talk. We'll be back in 2 weeks.